The alert did not ring like a siren. It breathed, a rise in background noise across consoles and quiet eyes, as if the heliosphere itself exhaled a warning. The numbers around 3i Atlas no longer closed neatly, and somewhere in the fabric of trajectories, a new term had crept in that insisted on being named. We know the feeling of tidy orbits, the grammar of ellipses speaking plainly of mass and distance and time. But this visitor crossed our sky with the poise of a letter addressed to no one, a sentence fragment from another star, gliding between the familiar and the unaccounted. Planetary defense teams are good at boredom, rehearsing precision in the absence of emergency, and yet their boredom is the edge we live on, because once in a long while the cosmos puts a thumb on the scales and requests that our equations grow up. You can feel the atmosphere of that growth in the hum of servers and the tea gone cold next to a console, in the careful hands of analysts who know the difference between statistical heat and the first spark of a real fire. The visitor is small, likely less than a kilometer across, a dim grain on our detectors, and a bright thorn in the assumptions that comfort us. Somewhere, a scheduler moves a quiet line of text. Observe again, calibrate again, fit again. Somewhere else, a path through the solar system changes by a hair's breadth, and the hair belongs to the lion that walks through interstellar night. We call it 3i Atlas because names are anchors, and we need anchors when the sea is deep. The Atlas survey caught its hyperbolic scent first, a trajectory that refuses gravity's embrace with the clean refusal of a line that won't curve back. Hyperbolic excess velocity, the signature of elsewhere. The energy above escape whispers that this object did not fall from our Oort cloud or Kuiper leftovers. It carries the inheritance of a different sun, or perhaps no sun at all, wandering the cold capitalism of interstellar space where resources are meager, collisions rare, and time of vast convalescence. It matters to us because every interstellar messenger is a sample return of a kind. Within its dust, its volatile ices, its weathered regolith is a chemical essay on how planets are built and unbuilt, on how molecules survive radiation baths and epochal winters between stars. It matters because the second interstellar object was a shock that became a curiosity, and the third becomes a pattern. And patterns are how science turns chance into law. Astronomers triangulate with arrays of mirrors and dishes and radars, tying knots in the light to pull out not only where it is and how fast, but what it is, by the colors it steals and returns. The significance is not only academic. Planetary defense is an exercise in geometry and humility, to know what approaches, to model it honestly, and to decide when necessary whether to nudge, shield, or simply bow. 3i Atlas arrives in that liminal space between mystery and mandate. Data then, the sky resolves into a time series, a rhythm of photons caught and counted. Photometry names a flicker, a rotational period that beats faintly under noise, as if the object is less a solid body than a scaffold, spinning with a lopsided grace. Spectra lean toward the carbon-dark, metal-quiet end of reflectance, a surface charcoal and ancient, perhaps mantled by space-weathered organics, perhaps pitted with volatiles that sublimate only reluctantly at solar distance. The orbit fit is textbook hyperbola at first pass, inbound at a vector that slices the ecliptic on a plane just tilted enough to complicate our radars and delight our dynamicists. We map its motion against the parallax of Earth's own sweep. We subtract the tug of known masses, and we find the residuals, the small stubborn differences between prediction and reality, which are the places reality writes its footnotes. Our instruments breathe in the ultraviolet and exhale numbers. Our telescopes tighten their optics and the guiding stars settle, scattering reduced to a fine fog across the detector. Around perihelion, the point of closest gaze to the sun, the light curve becomes a little ragged, as if the heat has woken something. We watch for a coma, that fuzzy shroud of dust and gas that declares a comet awake. But the coma keeps its counsel, if it exists at all, whisper-thin and tightly bound. Radar paints a grainy silhouette when geometry allows. It is neither the laser-cut shard of a perfect sail, nor the snowball of textbook comets. It is a compromise, a survivor, a thing adapted by accident or designed to long winters in the dark. Somewhere in those residuals, though, a nudge declares itself. Non-gravitational acceleration is the technical phrase, a small but coherent push that refuses to vanish when we have accounted for every mass, every photon, every tide we know how to count. Sunlight exerts pressure. Every photon is a knock at the door, and an object with the right architecture can answer those knocks as thrusts. Water ice vents can behave like tiny engines too, if sunlight frees them into jets. But the angular dependence, the way the acceleration lines up with the object's attitude in the sun's favor, is not only subtle, it is unusually behaved, as if the surface is not shedding gas in sporadic geysers, but responding as a whole. The drift is gentle, persistent, like a fingertip on a compass needle. We have seen this before in hints, in the odd acceleration of a prior interstellar visitor, in the whisper of pressure on a fragmentary sail that might not be a sail. What is different now is not only the signal's strength, but its timing. It rises as the object rotates through a particular pose and declines when the pose is lost. Engineers who never imagined they would be called on to explain geology find themselves sketching trusses and honeycombs in the margins of orbital fit reports. And geologists who never imagined they would invoke engineering begin to speak of porosity as if it were a blueprint. Somewhere between the granular and the designed, a possibility opens, a natural fractal of ice and dust so porous that sunlight carries it like wind carries a thistle seed, or an artifact meant to sip photons and lean. To speak of artifacts is not to surrender to fantasy. It is to admit that our priors are uncomfortably narrow when the data lean against them. So we lay out the shelf of hypotheses with the care of curators. 1. A superporous aggregate, the kind of ultralight carbonaceous aerogel nature could make in the freeze-dry of interstellar space, toughened by radiation chemistry into a black foam that is nearly all void. 2. Outgassing without coma, volatile species rare and tightly trapped, venting through micro-fissures that are too few to decorate the sky with dust, but sufficient to nudge dynamics inside our residuals. 3. Thin-film ice structures born in the nebular outskirts of some other star, layered like mica, delaminating softly under heat and photon tide. 4. An engineered sail or scaffold, not a shining triangle, but a crumpled origami built for stealthy survival rather than spectacle, a machine that drinks radiation rather than broadcasting it, its control surfaces worn smooth by 1,000,000 years of dust. We test each against the numbers. Porosity buys you pressure coupling, but must be reconciled with the observed spin response. Outgassing buys you thrust with a thermal cue, but asks you to explain spectroscopy's silence. Engineering buys you all the freedom in the world, and with that freedom comes the burden of specificity. If a thing is designed, you should be able to guess what it is designed for. Perhaps it is none or some braided combination. The discipline is not to choose the most exciting answer, but to keep all answers alive until one dies of its own contradictions. Coincidence is the stage name of inevitability when we are unprepared. And 3i Atlas arrives in a season of alignments that feels scripted by a sky with a sense of drama. A spate of minor geomagnetic unrest fusses with high-frequency communications just when we would prefer our radar cheer. P.S. to sing clean. A cluster of stellar occultations, the objects sliding in front of distant stars, happens during a narrow window when a network upgrade takes a telescope offline for exactly the hours we had reserved, forcing hurried handoffs and improvisations across continents. A maintenance window at a deep space facility was scheduled months before the discovery and would be ridiculous to cancel given the slow accretion of deadlines, yet its overlap with the critical arc of the object's outbound turn is precise enough to make superstition breathe on the back of your neck. And then there are the synchronized whispers. A micrometeor swarm grazes one hemisphere, Small satellites switch to safe mode. A data relay station in the desert goes down under a heat wave. None of these events mean anything together. And yet meaning is the human instinct, and pattern recognition has saved more lives than it has misled. Statistically, the alignments are tolerable. Psychologically, they invite a story. The responsible thing is to separate narrative from necessity while remaining honest about how little we truly control. We lace coincidence with contingency plans and call it systems engineering. Gravity is the art critic of motion, relentless and opinionated, and 3 Atlas earns its review in the gallery of orbital dynamics. A hyperbola is not a straight road, it is a curve sketched by defiance, and that curve is written not only by the sun's dominance, but by the chorus of lesser voices, Jupiter's distant drum, Earth's brief whisper, the slight but precise tides of Venus and Saturn, barely chalking the blackboard, but chalking it all the same. We map the resonant planes the object traverses, places where the periods of rotation and revolution conspire to offer micro-slingshots, small exchanges of momentum that do not move the world, but do leave a fingerprint. In simulations, we watch clones of the orbit peel away from one another like petals, each petal the fate of a subtly different initial condition, each fate an echo of how randomness sculpts certainty. Close approach distances to Earth are broad enough to calm the adrenaline, yet narrow enough that radar windows open like rehearsal halls. The shape model we infer from light curves suggests a lumpy elegance, perhaps a bilobed body, perhaps a flattened shard, its principal axis wobbling with the dignity of an old dancer remembering the choreography by feel. Spin-orbit coupling matters. If photon pressure is indeed a player, the orientation of planes and the cadence of rotation become gears in a machine we are only just learning to describe. It is here that planetary defense likes to live, in the machines of heaven, tuned and described well enough that we can act without drama, should drama insist. There's a hole in the timeline, and we pour suspicion into it, because darkness is not only what we don't see, it's what we supply meaning to. For several rotations during a critical approach, clouds and outages and logistics colluded to blind our best instruments. The fit degraded. The error bars swelled their chests like soldiers on parade. In that vacuum, rumor breeds, someone claims a faint transient on a classified sensor. Someone else remembers an oddly specific satellite avoidance maneuver called up on short notice. A document with too many black boxes circulates in a private channel with a wry emoji. It is almost certain that the blackout period is mundane, a seam between night and day in 1,000 separate systems, most of them built by people who have never heard of one another. But the timing irritates. And there is a different kind of blackout, the chosen silence of agencies that prefer to release conclusions rather than data, not for malice, but because conclusions are easier on the public digestion. We interpret that caution as conspiracy because caution is the color of secrets in stories we like to tell. The truth is duller and more demanding. Partial data are ethical hazards. If you publish them wrong, you can drive the world to the wrong hill at speed. So the suspicion hangs. It can be productive when it drives better transparency. It can be corrosive when it whispers that nature has been replaced by intent where none exists. The grown-up task is to hold both, to insist on openness, and to allow for the possibility that sometimes the night is just the night. The implications are not just philosophical, they are hydraulic, pushing pressure through the pipes of budgets and plans. If an object can convert sunlight into motion more efficiently than our comet models predict, then our deflection strategies must speak a broader dialect. A kinetic impactor aims at the heart of mass and momentum. A photon sail-like body answers to surface force, and what you hit may not be what you think you are steering. We need interceptors that can approach low-albedo targets fast, sample them, and deploy micro-propulsion in response to measured non-gravitational terms rather than assumed ones. We need telescope constellations that can see the unlit, thermal eyes and occultation mappers that do not surrender when dust stays home. Algorithms must evolve from hearing shouts to hearing whispers, catching gentle drifts early enough that long lead times are not acts of faith but of math. At a grander scale, if interstellar debris or devices are more common than we guessed, the case for a standing interstellar patrol becomes compelling. A fleet of modest craft on solar electric diets, stationed in heliocentric orbits like rangers in the vast park between worlds, ready to pivot toward messengers with lab-on-chip curiosity and diplomacy for rocks. We will build better coronagraphs for starlight suppression and open infrared windows that the atmosphere has kept shut for too long. We may, with courage and collaboration, decide to treat the next visitor as a rendezvous rather than a flyby, touching a thing that remembers the temperature of interstellar midnight. None of this erases the risk that rides shotgun with wonder. Paradigm shifts are not only upgrades in how we think, they are changes in the architectures we trust. If sunlight can move a relic so much, sunlight can move a probe as well, and a probe can be steered. To say this is not to raise a flag of fear, but to acknowledge that agency, if it exists, must be met with agency of our own that is both restrained and ready. The policy language for contact without conversation is thin. The norms for approaching a possibly engineered object are thinner. Do we signal with radar pings designed to be curious but not invasive? Do we frame any maneuver as a courtesy, a maritime passing in the cosmic shipping lanes? Legal frameworks trail the physics by a generation. Ethics must run faster. Yet the future implied by 3I Atlas is above all fertile. Materials science will learn from the possibility of ultralight strength, harvesting ideas for sails, habitats, and shields from a thing that may have grown such properties by accident. Astrobiology will expand its palette. Organics and radiation create chemistries that can masquerade as design, and design can masquerade as geology. Education will change most of all, for nothing recruits new minds like the taste of the unknown on the wind. And then the horizon opens, because it always does after panic has been metabolized into purpose. We will fly craft that drink the sun, their thin films unfurling like morning glories beyond Earth's shadow, riding photon tides with a grace our rockets cannot imitate. We will build telescopes that do not look but listen, gauging gravity subtly enough to sense a whispering acceleration from tens of millions of kilometers away, turning the heliosphere into a grand interferometer. We will store propellant not in tanks but in knowledge, because a trajectory chosen years early is fuel in another currency. When the fourth interstellar arrives, we won't lunge. We will pivot, because we will already be moving in the correct frame philosophically and mechanically. Children will grow up with posters of not only planets and nebulas, but of trajectories, those smooth arcs that are both art and argument. They will learn that between stars, the void is not empty, but textured with chants and relics, and perhaps messages that do not speak in words. They will learn that planetary defense is not paranoia. It is stewardship, a way of reading the sky that honors both our fragility and our audacity. Tonight, somewhere on a mountain, a dome opens like an eyelid. The air is thin enough to taste. The instruments cool and settle, and the guiding system locks onto a blameless star, a cradle for calibration. The scheduler's quiet line of text becomes a human gaze pressed into glass, a stream of photons translated into meaning. 3I Atlas is a speck among specks, except that it is not. It is the question mark at the end of a sentence the galaxy began before we had mouths to read it with. The teams in quiet rooms are doing what teams have always done in the face of the sublime, checking, recalculating, arguing gently, daring to name possibilities that will look embarrassing if they are wrong and visionary if they are right. Outside those rooms, we have our roles too, to remain curious, to accept uncertainty without yielding to fantasy, to fund patience, to reward precision, and to invite courage. Whether 3I Atlas is a foam of ancient ice or a tired machine, or the nudge is sunlight braided through voids or a sail adjusting itself, it has already done what such visitors have always done at their best. It has changed us a little by reminding us that the universe is a plural noun. We will keep watch as it leaves because departure is a kind of data. Its outbound path will be written in the new coefficients in residuals that now bow more readily to the model in a light curve that will either settle into the routine of a retired astonishment or continue to twitch with an unspent secret. The radar windows will close, the spectra will grow thin, the committees will file their reports. But someone will keep an eye on the patch of sky it wounds behind it, because sometimes the vacuum is not empty even when the source is gone. Dust behaves like memory. It lingers, it scatters, it contributes to the background from which future objects must be extracted. And human memory behaves like dust as well. The story of Three-Eye Atlas will drift into textbooks and documentaries, accruals that soften edges and harden conclusions. That is right. And also incomplete. Leave room for the grit, for the laughter in the control room when a model finally converges at 3 a.m., for the small grief of losing a target you learned the heartbeat of. Leave room for the small ritual of stepping outside, away from screens, to look up with eyes that cannot possibly see the thing you have spent months measuring, simply to acknowledge the scale of what your instruments made intimate. There is a way the universe looks at us when we look at it with honesty. It looks back, not with intent perhaps, but with consequences that flow naturally from curiosity. We sent Voyager and it turned around to show us our smallness. We built particle colliders and the vacuum told us that symmetry breaks not with malice but with elegance. We modeled climate and the sky reminded us that equations are oaths. Now with Three-Eye Atlas, we are being asked to expand our grammar of motion and meaning. Whether artifact or accident, it nudges not only its own path but our civilizations. Let that nudge carry us toward readiness without panic, toward openness without credulity, toward a planetary defense that does not merely fear the sky, but converses with it. The sun will rise tomorrow as it always does, pouring momentum into our sails whether we deploy them or not. The deep night between stars will remain a cold republic of dust and relics and potentials. Between those truths is room for us to choose a posture, one of hunched, nervous waiting, or one of standing, instruments lifted, willing to meet visitors halfway, willing to learn from what does not fit, and to be enlarged by the learning,